Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I'm back with some more esoterica. Today we are diving back into the works of Mr. Eliphas Levi. This is Dogma and Ritual of Transcendental Magic. We are reading aloud and discussing as we go along the various points brought to light by the text. It is not the format for everyone, but some people do find value in it, so you are more than welcome to tag along as we continue our exploration. Before we begin, however, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in the terminology, there will be several playlists linked in the corner above, in the box down below, along with the original source material and the link for my book, so that you can get a better understanding of who I am and why I say the things that I do. A particular note today is almost certainly going to be the fundamental harmonics of life. It's a standalone video that will be linked up here where we discuss in some extreme detail why 8 is actually the preferable number to 7. Today I am probably going to step on a lot of toes. I want you to know straight off the top it is not intentional, but I absolutely do not apologize for it. So, with that being said, let us dive in and continue our exploration of Dogma and Ritual and see how many people we can get upset. Transcendental Magic, Chapter 7. The Fiery Sword. Netza Gladius. The septenary is the sacred number in all theogonies and in all symbols, because it is composed of the triad and the tetrad. And already. This is a big word. All is a very large word. It is all-encompassing. If you say all, it means every single instance. In the exact same way that I get annoyed when people say in a word and then they give you a paragraph. If you are using big words, they should be applicable. This absolutely is not. 7 is an important number to many people, but that is due to a misunderstanding of the fundamentals of life. There are many reasons for why you should, instead of 7, use the number 8. The number of manifestation is 1, 3, 8, right? That is 1 for the oneness, the spirit, all is 1. 3 for the Trinity, mind, body, and soul. And 8 for the 7 internal chakras and the 1 external chakra that you have access to, which gives you the power of manifestation. These are the fundamental numbers, 1, 3, 8. You can find them iterated all over the place. They are included in the Fibonacci series. They are included pretty much everywhere. There are 8 classifications of gemstones. There are 8 different types of metals. There are 8 components to the earth, right? From the mantle or from the core all the way up to the water layer, there are 8 layers. There are 8 layers to the atmosphere. That is from the water level to space. There are 8 facets to the human personality. There are a multitude of 8s. Now, we do use the number 7 for a variety of things, and some of those are misunderstandings. To say that the number 7 is important to all theogonies is prima facie, on the face, wrong. It is just not true. There have been many other theogonies that use different numbers. Some of them use 6, some of them use 8, some of them use 10, some of them use 12. There are a variety, and therefore it is not all. And because it is composed of the triad and the tetrad, is just completely arbitrary, right? That is completely dismissing the monad and the duad, which are kind of vital to both the triad and the tetrad. It is simply taking these two numbers that we want to add up to something because they add up to something and using them. I already have it in my mind that 7 is an important number. How do we get to 7? We add these two things that may or may not be relevant to that. Once again, we have a fundamental misunderstanding of the terminology, right? In the exact same way that logos is completely misunderstood everywhere that it is referenced, this is another one of those things, right? 8 is the base, right? Base computing can't work without base 8, right? Binary works off of the function of 8. All of your graphics come from 8. Everything, like everything's a big word, right? Not everything is 8, but most things are 8. Even to the point you draw a square and you bring it out to a cube, right? From the 2D into the 3D, that's 8, right? There are a lot of examples, and we will be going through several of them. I got my cheat sheet out here today because we're going to need it. So let's dive back in. The number 7 represents magical power in all its fullness. And again, I disagree. Now, I want to put the caveat on here because sometimes 7 is acceptable, right? 7 is only acceptable, however, with the understanding that 8 is the missing, the not understood, the beginning of the next, right? It is the 1 and 8 hold the same significance, right? It is the infinite, right? The 8 is the infinity symbol turned on its side. 0 is forever eating its own tail. Both of them represent the source. 1 you come from, 1 you return to, infinity in both hands. And so you can have 1 through 7, but it is with the understanding of 8, right? Colors, for instance, which I'm sure we're going to get to in just a minute. It always infers that there is another layer that is not included. Now, again, that is using a big word, right? Every and all are big words. And so I try not to do that. But most cases, that's going to be it, right? There are some where it is 7, but for most of them, it is actually 8 if you actually think about it. Let's dive back into the text. It is the mind reinforced by all elementary potencies. And again, all is a big word. You're going to list those elemental potencies. Is that the 4 elements, earth, air, wind, or earth, air, fire, and water, plus 3, the Trinity maybe, so that you can pull 7 out of it? Like, what are the elementary potencies? Where is the list of those? I do not believe we have seen a list of these elementary potencies. I don't know them, right? I assume that he's talking about what I just listed, the 4 elements, but there is no reason for me to assume that I am correct. And so we will see if it is further explained, but probably not. It is the soul served by nature. Is completely pulling something out of your ass. Where is the supporting documentation for that, right? How do you know that 7 is the soul served by nature? What gives you that understanding? Where do you pull that knowledge from, right? Did you talk to souls and find out? Did you have the discourse with the eternal and find out that the soul is served by nature and that means 7? Like, where did that come from? Is it just something that you assume and therefore you insert? It is the sanctum regnum mentioned in the Keys of Solomon. And once again, I am going to reiterate that Solomon is no one to listen to. And represented in the tarot by a crowned warrior who bears a triangle on his cuirass and is posed upon a cube, to which 2 sphinxes are harnessed, straining in opposite directions while their heads are turned the same way. I am unfamiliar with this card. Now, a crowned warrior would imply to me that it's going to be one of the kings, maybe the emperor, right? We're talking about a guy because he's implying warrior, and in the tarot, warriors are not represented by the feminine, right? And so 2 sphinxes are harnessed. That's going to give me the chariot. That might give you the devil, but probably not. But he's not sitting on a cube, right? He's not bearing well, he might be bearing a triangle on his cuirass. I'm not going to pull it up and look, but posed upon a cube, that's not the chariot for sure. And so I'm not sure exactly what this is supposed to represent, right? The 2 sphinxes, that's a pretty distinctive thing. And we saw prior that he referenced one of the cards wrong, right? With the heart instead of pointing down, and he described it later in the way that it actually is. So maybe this is one of those situations where he just doesn't know what he's talking about. And I could be wrong. If you know what tarot card that is, I'm not an expert by any means. I'm still waiting to be able to buy my deck here in a couple of days. And then I'll start learning it in some detail. But yeah. Anyway, back to the text. This warrior is armed with a fiery sword. Okay, so that's going to be in the sword suit. Maybe we're talking about the king of swords. No, it can't be. And holds in his other hand a scepter, surmounted by a triangle and a sphere. The cube is the philosophical stone. The sphinxes are the 2 forces of the great agent, corresponding to Yakin and Boaz, the 2 pillars of the temple, which we have talked about several times. The curious is the knowledge of divine things, which renders the wise man invulnerable to human assaults. That is not right. Like, Again, big words, right? Invulnerable means that nothing can hurt you. That's not true. Right? Now, with the exception that life is immortal, and you, as an adept, understand that. And so, while you value your life, it's not to the point of despair if you lose it, right? You know something is coming, and so, therefore, it is okay if you die, even if it's not something that you necessarily welcome. In that case, yes, invulnerable too. But in real, actual physicality, no, not so much. You can be assaulted by your neighbor for absolutely no reason and wind up hurt. That is absolutely a possibility. And so, right, again, on the allegorical level, yes, okay. Right, nothing can hurt you if you know that everything's eternal and everything happens according to the plan, then nothing is going to bother you. You will be invulnerable to human assaults. But on the physical level, that is absolutely not true. The scepter is the magic rod. The fiery sword is the symbol of victory over the deadly sins. 7 in number, like the virtues, the conceptions of both being typified by the ancients under the figures of the 7 planets then known. So far, so good. Thus, faith, that aspiration towards the infinite, that noble self-reliance, sustained by confidence in all virtues, that faith, which in weak natures may degenerate into pride, was represented by the sun. Hope, the enemy of avarice. Whoa, high guard, what? Hope, the enemy of avarice? Do you not know what the word avarice is? Avarice is greed. It is the uncommon love of things material. That is absolutely not the opposite of hope. That's absolutely not the opposite of hope. The opposite of hope is despair. It's despair. It is not having hope. That would be the opposite of hope. It's not having money. Are you kidding me? Like, this is definitionally, verifiably untrue. Hope, the enemy of avarice, by the moon. Right? Faith may degenerate into pride, which was represented by the sun. So, pride and faith are the two keys there. No, it's pride and humbleness. Is that something that is beyond the conception? Right? Am I wrong here? Is it not pride and humbleness? Is it not I am better than you or we are all equal? Is that not the difference? Is that not what that is? Faith and disbelief would be contrary, but not pride. So faith in weak natures may degenerate into pride was represented by the sun. We'll get to that. Hope, the enemy of avarice, by the moon. Again, that is not the coins. Charity, in opposition to luxury, by Venus. That's kind of right? If you would have taken this word and placed that here, then that would have made more sense. But luxury is not greed, right? The opposite of charity is going to be greed, right? Giving away things or hoarding all of the things to yourself. It's going to be those coins. That's not luxury. You can give to charity and still live a luxurious life. People do it all of the time. That doesn't mean that they are necessarily doing it correctly, but they are doing it. Right now, you're not meant to hoard all of the things. Absolutely. You are not meant to give away all of the things. You're meant to strike that balance between the two. And that can mean, absolutely, that you live in luxury, right? You have a nice house. You eat good food. You dress well. And you still give to charity. That's balance. That's striking the accord between me and everyone, right? That's finding that balance between those two pillars, Boaz and Jachin, which you are not supposed to cleave to any, but walk between freely. We'll get to the planets in a minute. By Venus, the bright star of the morning and evening. Strength, superior to wrath, by Mars. And again, these are not the coins. Wrath, That is absolutely one of the vices. You want to know what the virtue is associated with wrath? The counterpoint for the base chakra, you have wrath and you have love. Those are the two keys, right? Love and wrath, which is love unreturned. The bitter resentment because it is not returned. You getting mad because you are not getting reciprocated in the manner which you were giving. Love and wrath. That's the two keys there. It is definitely not strength and wrath, because strength will help you use your wrath. It's not an opposite. Like, definitionally. Now, Mars is absolutely in charge of wrath, but other than that, no. Prudence. Hostile to idleness. Holy shit, he got one right. By Mercury. Holy shit, he got everything right. I mean, the terminology, right? Prudence and idleness, sloth and diligence. That works. That one's actually correct. And Mercury is actually in charge of that one. Now, bonus points if you know before I say it where that is attached to. We are going to get to it, but let's get through all of them real quick. Temperance, opposed to gluttony. Holy shit, he got 2 by Saturn. Did he get that right? I don't think he got that right. Nope, he got that wrong. Who was given a stone instead of his children. Who was given a stone instead of his children to devour. Now, all right, so that, what happened there when he was given the stone instead of his children to eat, that wasn't because of gluttony. That wasn't because of gluttony. You want to know what that was because of? Do you want to know? I want to tell you. It's pride. Saturn was prideful. He didn't want to give away his rulership to his progeny, and therefore he devoured his kids so that they couldn't take over. That's what that was about. It was about pride. That's ruled by somewhere's different. Right? Temperance and gluttony, yes, you got that. Saturn, not so much. And finally, justice in opposition to envy. Neither one of those are associated at all. Right? All right. Let's go through by Jupiter, the conqueror of the Titans. Now, we're going to go through my cheat sheet real quick. Let's see if I can get this where y'all can actually pause it and look at it. Actually, let's do this real quick. I'm going to swap it around so that we can do this, and y'all can, if you can read my writing, which is definitely not a guarantee, right? But you can pause that, look at it. We're going to read through it real quick. All right, so we've got 7 virtues. We've got 7 vices. They offset each other. They are associated with the 7 human chakras, not the 8th, the divine, because the divine is perfection, and we are not that. We are the 7 inside. We have access to the 8. It is part of our intrinsicness. It makes the 8 work, but it is not who we are. We are the other 7, right? And starting at the bottom, which is the base, we're going to have wrath and love, and that is going to be governed by Mars and associated with copper. Next up, we have the duad, which is the sacral, and that is going to be lust and chastity, ruled by Venus, and has associated with it 10. We have the Trinity, the number 3. That is going to be the solar plexus, the 3rd step up. It is going to be yellow. It is gluttony and temperance, right? What you eat makes a difference. It is governed by the moon, and it is associated with silver. The square, 4. That is going to be governed by the earth. It is greed and charity. You are here to learn how to balance those things. Greed is the love of the material. Charity is the love of the spiritual. It's associated with your heart because it is binding together the below and the above. And it is associated with the color green and iron. Next up, we got the pentagram, the number 5. It is pride and humility. We just talked about that. It is associated with the throat, because where does your pride stem from? Your voice. It is led by who? Saturn. We just talked about that. And lead, because it is false gold. Next up, we got the hexagram. That is going to be the number 6. That is sloth and diligence. That is governed by Mercury, associated with the metal mercury, and the color indigo. That is the 3rd eye. And then finally we have the crown, right? The crown is going to be despair and hope. That is directly connected to the divine. That is the source of despair and hope. Hope is things are going to work out. Despair is nothing is going to work out. That's the two coins right there. That is governed by Jupiter, the crown, the divine, right? Jupiter, the king of planets, and the color gold, or the metal gold, not the color gold. Now, these are not the colors, right? The metals and the colors are not going to be the same. But these appear to be the way that it works out. Now, the sun is its own thing. It is associated with the divine, not necessarily with the chakras, right? Now, this here, the Eliphas Levi and his stuff, they didn't view the earth, right? They said 7 because they did not take into account the planet that they were on. It's still a planet. Guess how many planets we have, right? They didn't know about the ones in the outer, but we do. There's still 8 of them, right? There was 8 with them, counting the sun and the moon, or 7 with them, counting the sun and the moon and not counting the earth. But if you count the actual planets, there are 8 of them. If you count Earth with the planets as they understood them, there were 8 of them too. They just didn't understand the 8th one. They didn't take it into account. The sun is the divine, right? It is the source of all things. It is infinity. It is starting over. And it does have colors associated with it, right? The combination of all colors, which is white, and the absence of all colors, which is black, in equal proportions. That is the divine chakra. Now, all of that is in direct opposition to most of what he said here, right? He only got one of the people right. He got a couple of the concepts right. But definitionally, he was wrong, right? Avarice, like that one right there, like definitionally, avarice is greed. And so I am in direct opposition to most of the things stated here already. All of this from this cheat sheet, it's in the book, right? The book is available. There's a link down below for the print and the digital versions. All of this is in there already, with the exception of assigning the planets in this manner, which will probably make the second edition. These things, the way that I describe them, have worked for me. Now, that's not to say that you can't sustain some value from this. People have, even though it hasn't worked in the way that they wanted it to, ever. But yeah, go ahead and take it at face value. He absolutely knows what he's talking about, even though he doesn't get the definitions right in words. Like, how do you even mess up that? How do you even say, yes, these two things are in direct opposition to each other, even though they have no relation to each other? That's wild to me. That's absolutely wild to me. And people take him for an authority. Such are the symbols borrowed by astronomy from the Hellenic cultus in the Kabbalah of the Hebrews. Another thing not to take a whole lot from. The sun represents the angel of light. The moon, the angel of aspirations and dreams. Mars, the destroying angel. Mercury, the angel of progress. Jupiter, the angel of power. Saturn, the angel in the wilderness. They were named Michael, Gabriel, Samael, Anael, Raphael, Zachariel, and Oraphel. These governing potencies of souls shared human life in periods. That is an assumption, which astrologers measured by the revolutions of the corresponding planets. But Kabbalistic astrology must not be confounded with judicial astrology. We will explain this distinction. Infancy is dedicated to the sun, childhood to the moon, youth to Mars and Venus, manhood to Mercury, ripe age to Jupiter, and old age to Saturn. I am going to take exception with that order, right? If this is inaccurate, then if it is an accurate conception, then it is going to follow the order from base to crown. Now, this is based upon a theory that there are different periods in life. Every 7 years, according to this, it changes, right? The first 7 years is one lesson, the next 7 years is another one. I hold different for the reasons already talked about, 8 being the number, right? Your first 8 years, that's going to be from birth until 3rd grade or so here in the States, is you learning to navigate the world, right? Learning that the world even exists, that there is a thing out there called the world, right? You begin with no conception, and by the time you're in 3rd grade, you have some kind of a conception that others are out there and others are important. Now, that could be just as easily 2nd grade and 7, right? But then we get into a little bit more complicated, right? So in the first system, 7 to 14 is going to be the next step, and in mine, it's going to be 8 to 16, right? That is going to be your formative years, right? You had the understanding that there was a world out there, and now you have to make decisions about the world, right? You are learning and deciding how you are going to engage in the world, how you are going to go out into the world, not doing it yet, just understanding, yes, I am going to have to. How am I going to go about it? And that's where you set almost all of your life patterns, is between the ages of 8 and 16. Now, many of your challenges are set by the age of 8, right? Most of the things that you are going to have to overcome are set by 8. How your family interacts, how you are treated, both at home and in the public, right? All of these things are beginning to form. They are pretty set, right? If you're going to be picked on in school, you're being picked on in 3rd grade. If you're going to be the one picking on people in school, you're doing that by 3rd grade. By 2nd grade, people are still kind of not in that energy yet, right? There are exceptions, but for the most part, from 8 to 16 is very valuable. And here's where the other system really starts to break down, right? Because you could still argue 7 to 14 about the same. But then the next step from 16 to 24, where you're really engaging with the world, you're really out there learning the things that you need to be successful in life, they conclude about the age of 24. You know what happens about the age of 24? The cortex, the functionality between the two halves of your brain solidify in men at about the age of 23 to 24. You start being able to actually think in an intelligent manner about the age of 24, not the age of 21. That is a big difference. Now, it doesn't seem that way. It's only 3 years, but it is a compounding, right? You are not ready at the age of 21 to understand most things. And I fully acknowledge that we call them adults, right? We send them off to war to die. I have been there. I was 18 years old when I just made 19, I think. Well, no, I was 18, about to make 19 when I joined. I had no clue. I was a dumbass from the get-go, right? That is true of most youth. You don't really get an understanding until around the age of 23 to 24, when that cortex ties together. Right? And then the next step, and the next step, and the next step, all the way up to 80, which is the end expectation of life for most people. Now, I grant that today we extend that a fair bit. But throughout history, 80 was a pretty hard definitive line for dying. Right? Most people didn't make it there. Many people never made it past the age of 40. More than that, never made it past the age of 60. But the upper extremity of life, naturally, for the most part, there are exceptions, was about 80 years old, which would be a cycle of 10 in 8. These are all speculative, right? These numbers are all speculative. I am putting my spin upon it with the number 8. They put their spin upon it with the number 7. I feel like mine fits better for a variety of reasons. You can do the math for yourself. I'm not going to go through all of the examples. But the progression matches closer to what I believe than to what is described here. And so again, this is a fundamental misunderstanding of the series. Back to the text. Now, humanity in general subsists under laws of development analogous to those of individual life. On this groundwork, Trithemius establishes his prophetic key of the 7 spirits, to which we shall subsequently refer by means thereof, observing the analogical proportions of successive events, it is possible to predict important future occurrences with certitude, and to fix beforehand from age to age the destinies of nations and of the world. Where is your book of prophecy, Mr. Levi? Where is your book of these things will happen according to this mathematical formula, and therefore I am infallible? This is a certitude. You know what certitude means? This is one of those definitional things. Certitude means that you can certify it. It is a 100% guarantee. Is it a 100% guarantee that you can take the number 7 and attach it to whatever historical event in any exponent, right? Whether it is 7, 14, 21, or whatever, you can do that. You can take this event, the start of World War I, and somehow, through the addition of 7, you can get to World War II. You can get to World War III. According to where this started, you can add the number 7 in any exponent. And then you can decide that this is when the war is going to start. Well, why haven't you done that? Here's one. Why didn't you predict that the stock market was going to fall? Right? That was in your lifetime. Why didn't you predict that the Civil War was going to kick off? That was in your lifetime. World War I was in your lifetime. Where are your picks? Now, I do believe that we can get a very, very dim glimpse into the future. That is the function of tarot and the other divinations, right? But you should not be basing major life events upon that. You should not be making financial decisions based upon predictions from some shady math. Now, it is entirely possible, but if it were possible, and this book has been around for, 150 years now? Something like that. It was 18 something. In all that time, nobody has taken this ability to certifiably predict the future due to the number 7. Nobody has put that into place. We don't have anybody since this instruction manual came out who has been able to accurately predict anything. Once again, definitionally problematical. Right? Certitude means 100%. It means that you can certify this thing is true, and you can't. Back to the text. St. John, depositary of the secret doctrine of Christ, has introduced into the Kabbalistic book of the Apocalypse, which he represents, sealed with 7 seals. That doesn't mean anything. I know that's going to step on a lot of toes, and it is entirely possible, and I even believe that these 7 seals are directly related to these 7 virtues and vices. Now, how exactly that works out is something that I haven't spent the time on. It is a possibility, but it is not something that I even need to worry about. Right? I do not foresee that the Antichrist is coming back. That's kind of not even what the book tells you if you read it correctly. I don't believe that there will be a judgment day where God is going to come and kill everybody on the planet and then judge them and throw some of them into heaven and throw some of them into hell, because, quite honestly, again, that is not even an Old Testament concept at all. There is literally none of that ever in the Old Testament. There is no heaven, there is no hell. There is only the land of the dead. And so the Apocalypse of St. John can be read allegorically with 0 problems. It cannot, however, be read literally without all kinds of problems. The main one being that he expected it to happen in his lifetime. That is a big problem. But there are more. And again, I refer you to the Bible study. If any of that is confusing to you, we have read through, we got 162 videos where we talk about why you don't listen to the Bible. Right? There is truth contained in the Bible, but the Bible itself is not truth. That is a big deal. That is stepping on a lot of toes, but I told you that shit was coming. Next. We there find the 7 genii of ancient mythologies, with the cups and swords of the tarot. What? So, St. John wrote the secret doctrine of Christ, introduced it to the Kabbalistic book of the Apocalypse, represented the seven seals, and in there you find the seven genii, I guess that's going to be the angels, of ancient mythologies, with the cups and swords. So the fiery swords of the angels and the cup of ever-burning wrath, maybe like the doctrine concealed under these emblems is the pure Kabbalah, which should not be listened to, already lost by the Pharisees at the time of Christ's advent. Lost. The scenes which succeeded one another in this wonderful prophetic epic are so many pentacles, the keys of which are the ternary, the quaternary, the septenary, and the duodenary. I don't know, I can't say that. Its hieroglyphic figures are analogous to those of the Book of Hermes, or the Genesis of Enoch, to make use of a tentative title which expresses merely the personal opinion of the erudite William Pastel. Now, I am not familiar with Mr. William Pastel. We have, however, read through what is accounted to be the works of Hermes Trismegistus. It is part of the Ancient Lore playlist that will be linked here. It has its own playlist, but I don't do the individual studies. I link the big ones, right? We also read through Enoch. That is in the Ancient Lore playlist as well. And there's not a whole lot of relation between those two. Now, this may be a different Book of Enoch, right? The Genesis of Enoch is not necessarily the Book of Enoch. They are titled differently. They may be different books. I don't know. But the Book of Enoch that we read does not have pretty much anything to do with the works of Hermes Trismegistus. And I say pretty much because, once again, I very rarely go 100% on anything. And you can always find an allegorical corollary in pretty much any story, right? Every work of fiction contains truth, and most works of truth contain fiction. And so you can pull truth and find correlations if you are looking for them, but that does not necessarily mean that they were intrinsic to the story. And so while you can find some corollaries between Hermes and Enoch, that does not mean that they are necessarily related, linked, or in any way together. I mean, just because it is there does not mean that it is not a coincidence. Coincidences do happen. The cherub, or symbolic bull, which Moses placed at the gate of the Edenic world, bearing a fiery sword, is a sphinx, having a bull's body and a human head. That is not described in Genesis, right? We do get that there was an angel with a fiery sword. We do get that, right? They are cast out of Eden. They are not allowed to return. That is absolutely a thing. There is no correlation for that particular angel with a symbolic bull at all. Having a bull's body and a human head at all. That is not referenced in Genesis at all. Like, you can go through, you can redo the word study and see if it's hidden. We have. There is no relation whatsoever in Genesis. Now, you can take Ezekiel and you can add that to Genesis and come to a conclusion, but that's pulling things out of your ass. That is forcing things to fit that don't. If it's not described as a bull with a human head holding the sword at the gates of Eden, then it's not. It is an angel. And for the most part, how are the angels described? Especially in Genesis, as being human, right? Whenever Abram goes to Lot, or whenever the angels are going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, which is a completely misunderstood story for a variety of reasons, what happens, right? Abram is sitting there and he looks and he sees these people approaching, and they appear human, but they are distinctive in some manner that lets him know that they are divine. Now, there is a possibility that meant they had red hair. There is another possibility that they had blonde hair, neither of which would have been too common in the area, except that, you had Moses was a redhead, you had David was a redhead, you had Esau was a redhead, and so it's not that uncommon. Maybe they were blonde. That's a little more uncommon. Regardless, they were human appearing with a distinctive quality. Not that they were a bull with a human head. That is not what is described at all. They didn't eat grain, they ate meat, right? And so this is something you're just pulling out of your ass, right? Yes, we are told that there is an angel at the gate to Eden. Now, I look at that in an entirely different way. The first 5 books, almost certainly, were not written by Moses. They were put together probably during the period of the Second Temple. That's going to be a little bit much for people. That is stepping on some more toes, but I told you that shit was coming. And so, what we have described in the book, to me, is part of the 12,000 year disaster cycle. What is that? It will be linked. But there is a cycle of disasters which is recorded, right? We have Plato, part of the Ancient Lore playlist. We read through Critias and Timaeus for Atlantis, and described in there, Plato recounts the story that Solon told him, then the story was told to Solon from his grandfather, and his grandfather visited Egypt in his youth, and he learned from an Egyptian priest that there were many cycles of destruction which were recorded in Egypt, and that the Greeks only knew of the last one, a flood. The one prior to that was fire. The next one is going to be fire. If that is true, the one 12,000 years ago, which would have been the fire, 6,000 years ago would have been the flood. The one 12,000 years ago would have been a fire event. What is probably recorded in Genesis is that event, because part of that will be a large plasmic discharge. What is that? Imagine a great lightning bolt, but it's not just like the lightning you see in an everyday storm. This thing is 30 miles long, 40 miles wide, a circle as big as a city, and it can raise mountains, right? It is an enormous electrical discharge. It would resemble a fiery sword. And if the ground comes up because of this plasmic discharge, loading a lot of heat in a mountainous region, kind of like what separates Babylon from Pakistan, maybe that's what happened. They were in the area, this fiery thing came down, and maybe it even blasted them out a little bit, made it, and then they look and they're like, oh, we can't go that way. The angel is descended with a fiery sword. Now, that is pure speculation. Take it with a grain of salt. But it fits a lot better than some bull's body with a human head holding the sword. Right? It works a little bit better. We have a historical record of this thing happening. Back to the text. Having a bull's body and a human head. It is the antique Assyrian Sphinx, and the combat and victory of Mithras were its hieroglyphical analyses. Now, this armed sphinx represents the law of mystery, which watches at the door of initiation to warn away the profane. And again, that is an insertion made by the clubs, right? The Masons, the Illuminati, the Skull and Bones. Those are all clubs. The Masons, in particular, puts a guard at the door, right? If they are doing their thing inside, there is a warden at the door. That's what this is, right? That's what he's talking about. The watches the door at the door of initiation to warn away the profane is for the clubs. It may have been for the Garden of Eden, but this is an insertion. I know that this thing works in this way, and so I am going to make the analogy that everything is going to work in that way. And that might be true, but it might not, right? Once again, speculative. Voltaire, who knew nothing of all this, was highly diverted at the notion of a bull brandishing a sword. What would he have said had he visited the ruins of Memphis and Thebes? And what would the echo of the past ages which slumbers in the tombs of Ramses have replied to those light sarcasms so much relished in France? The mosaic cherub represents also the great magical mystery of which the elements are expressed by the septenary, without, however, giving the final word. This verbum invariable of the sages of the Alexandrian interpret this Hebrew word, thus expressing the triplicity of the school, the word which Hebrew Kabbalists write Yahweh, and secondary principle, the dualism of the means, and the equal unity of the first and final principle. Then, further alliance between the triad and the tetrad in a word composed of 4 letters, which form 7 by means of a triple and double repetition. The word is pronounced Ararita. And again, this is all speculatory, right? I don't mean necessarily to shit on Kabbalah as much as I do, but there's not a whole lot of meat there from what I've gathered, right? They have come up with a whole lot of numbers. That doesn't mean that they necessarily work in the way that they are described. I have not done a deep dive into Kabbalah. We have only done these studies, and everything that I've seen in these studies has been factually incorrect, right? It doesn't matter which study it is that is talking about the Kabbalists. It is inserting things that are not necessarily there. Again, the triad and the tetrad, they are important. There are reasons for those to be important. But adding them together does not necessarily mean anything. Right? It can, absolutely. Coming to the number 7 means something, but it doesn't mean necessarily what is implied here. Right? This is an assumption. Here's how it worked. They got the word and then tried to fit things to it. Right? That's what this is. That's what this is. Because I've got the word. I know what it is. They had the word. They just did it wrong. The virtue of the septenary is an absolute in magic. I disagree. For the number is decisive in all things. Hence, all religions have consecrated it in their rites. And again, all is a big word. Show me the Janos. The 7th year, never mind. The 7th year was a jubilee among the Jews. That is true. They were big on the number 7, but pretty much all of the 7s we get come from this one source, which, by the way, was a deceptive one. The 7th year was a jubilee among the Jews. The 7th day is set apart for rest and prayer by the Jews. Now, that is observed by the Christians, but that came where? Where did we get that from? From the Jews. There are 7 sacraments, etc. Now, again, that is based upon what? The 7 colors of the prism. And guess what? There are not 7 colors. Right? We just hit that. I told you we'd be back. There are, right? Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. That's the 7 colors of the rainbow. But where do we get those colors from? How do we differentiate that the rainbow is there? You take a white light and you put it in a prism and it disperses and you get the 7 colors of the rainbow. That's what happens through the water in the sky when you see a rainbow. That's what you can do on your desk by yourself if you got a white light. Well, I wonder if white is a color. Is white a color? Is white a color? I think white is a color. I'm pretty sure that white is a color. And it is associated with the prism. Would that be 8? The one source and these 7 colors, would that make 8? I bet it would. I bet it would. I bet that if you had the 7 colors that come out of the prism plus the one that goes in, you actually get it. And you know what? If you take those 7 colors and you run it back through a prism, you get white. Oh crap. That's an 8. That's not a 7. I wonder if that is important. I bet it is. I bet that is exceedingly important. I bet that is foundationally important. 100%. I bet that. And the 7 musical notes. Holy crap, here we go again. Guess what? You know what the foundation of music is? It's this thing that we call the octave. You know what octave represents? 8. You got 7, right, inside of the chord, and then you have the 1 harmonic that leads into the next chord. Right? So you got C, D, E, F, G, A, B, according to how we play the piano, and then C. C, D, E, F, G, A, B. C makes the octave. C to C, B to B, A to A, E to E. That's the octave. It doesn't stop at 7, it goes to 8. I wonder if that is important. I bet it is. I wonder if that is foundationally important. I bet it is. 100%. Correspond also to the 7 planets of the ancients, which we have already talked about actually being 8. That is, to the 7 chords of the human lyre. The spiritual heaven has never changed. That is up for debate. And astrology has been more invariable than astronomy. Now, when I say that, I am talking about the actual heavens, right? Not the internals, right? You have 7 internal, 1 external, that is 8. The spiritual heaven has never changed. It's definitely up for debate. Now, well, the physical heaven has never changed, would be up for debate, I guess. Not the spiritual one. I'm wrong on this one. But there were 8 planets, even if they didn't know about it. There were 8 planets that they were aware of, even if they did not acknowledge them. 8 is fundamentally more important than 7 for both of those things. And so, 8. The 7 planets are, in fact, the hieroglyphic symbols of the key of our affections. To compose talismans of the sun, moon, or Saturn is to attach the will magnetically to signs corresponding to the chief powers of the soul. All right, let's hit that. Talismans, amulets, ceremonies are all worthless. They only hold value by what you imbue in them. And I told you that right here is to attach the will magnetically to signs. Now, whether that corresponds to the chief powers of the soul is entirely up for debate. But this is a possibility, and one which is not something you should probably use because you almost certainly will do it wrong, right? None of the descriptions are going to be correct if they deal with demons or angels or entities at all. Most of the other understandings are going to be fundamentally flawed because they are based upon the wrong number. And so, take whatever he says with a grain of salt. You can, however, imbue these things with power. You can take any tool and imbue it with use, right? A knife, which I just happen to have one right here, can do absolutely nothing on its own. If I set it right here, it will stay right there until someone picks it up. But I can imbue my will and I can cut things with it, right? That is a tool. It has no power on its own. That is exactly the same for these tools on the shelf behind me as it is for this knife in front of me. It does absolutely nothing on its own. There is no piece of clothing that holds power. There is no physical object that you can place your hands upon that can do anything on its own. There is no ceremony that holds intrinsic value of its own. These things are falsehoods told to you to control you. You have to abide by these ceremonies or else, right? That was to keep the initiations. That is not to say that there are not repercussions for doing it wrong, right? Taking the correct steps are important, but most of those steps are internal. They are not signified, but you can imbue power into the signification. When you draw the pentagram on the ground, you are placing power in that pentagram. Your faith is powering that. It is not the pentagram in and of itself. And a pentagram in and of itself cannot contain an entity. Just so everybody is abundantly clear. Back to the text. To consecrate something to Mercury or Venus is to magnetize that object according to a direct intention, whether pleasure, science, or profit be the end in view. And that is true, right? You can create talismans. That is true. You can perform ceremonies, and they can hold power if you imbue your will. The problem being, right, karma, right? There, for every intended consequence, there are at least 3 unintended ones. It doesn't matter what you're doing. You will find that to be true in your real life. If you pay a bill, it is going to affect 3 other things, 2 of which you will have no clue about. And so, you can create this thing. You can imbue your life force into this ceremony, but if you don't dismiss it correctly, your life force is tied to that. That's a horrible thing. Back to the text. The analogous metals, animals, plants, and perfumes are auxiliaries to this end. Oh boy. Right. I told you already, there are 8 classifications. Right. I've got a whole video up here, so I'm not going to dive into detail, but I did dive into detail. This video, the fundamental harmonics of life, it's not going to pop up right here. I'll link them all at the beginning, but that video will tell you about this. Right. There are important numbers. 8 is one of them. 7 less so. The 7 magical animals are, among birds, corresponding to the divine world: the swan, the owl, the vulture, the dove, the stork, the eagle, and the pewit. B. Among fish, corresponding to the spiritual or scientific world: the seal, the catfish, the pike, the mullet, the chub, the dolphin, the sepia, or cuttlefish. Among quadrupeds, corresponding to the natural world: the lion, the cat, the wolf, the he-goat, the monkey, the stag, and the mole. The blood, fat, liver, and gall of these animals serve in enchantments. Their brain combines with the perfumes of the planets and is recognized by ancient practice that they possess magnetic virtues corresponding to the 7 planetary influences. Alright, we're going to hit all of this in one section, right? This, in its entirety, is speculative. There is 0 fact contained in this. Now, do the fat, liver, and gall of animals hold potential cures and remedies? Yes. Yes, they do. Fat, we use fat to cook with, and if you are using natural animal fat, you're probably healthier than these people using vegetable oil to cook in. That is a truth. The liver, high in iron. We eat that to cure blood diseases. That is a truth. The gall is kind of used for leather working more than anything else, right? It is something that helps set color in leather. It is used in other places. It's been used in ink for the exact same reason. And so, yes, these things are useful, but not in enchantments. Once again, an enchantment is simply a ritual. It is something that you are imbuing your life will into, and the tools don't matter. It doesn't matter if you use the fat from a lion or a wolf. If you are imbuing that with the correct intention, then it's going to work. Probably less efficiently than if you were doing it on a purely spiritual level. And so, while this is a possibility, it is not a truth. And again, there were 8 planets. The talismans of the 7 spirits are engraved either on the precious stones, such as carbuncle crystal, diamond, emerald, agate, sapphire, and onyx. Now, once again, I will point out that I've got a video over here. It's called The Fundamental Harmonics of Life. And one of the things that we discovered in the Fundamental Harmonics of Life is that there are 8 different kinds of crystals. From the agate, or the carbuncle, which is kind of amorphous. It doesn't really hold definition. All the way up to the diamond, which is the perfection of form, right? We also see that perfection of form in other places. Right? There are metals that are classified in exactly the same way that crystals are. They just structure a little bit differently in density. That is the major difference between them. There are 8 classifications, based upon the fundamental structure by which they strike, right? And so, you're wrong. Prima facie, on the face, this is incorrect. Now, that's not even getting into crystal, which I guess is going to be quartz. Now, but, on top of that, he has the correct, I'm fairly positive, not 100%, but these are 7 of the 8 divisions, right? He's only missing 1 division. The same with the metals. Gold, silver, iron, copper, or upon metals such as gold, silver, iron, copper, fixed mercury, pewter, and lead. Now, that is missing. We just went through them. We're not going to hit it again, but again, 8, not 7. The Kabbalistic signs of the seven spirits are, for the sun, a serpent with the head of a lion; for the moon, a globe divided by two crescents; for Mars, a dragon biting the hilt of a sword; for Venus, a lingam; for Mercury, the hermetic caduceus, or cynocephalus; for Jupiter, the blazing pentagram in the talons or beak of an eagle; for Saturn, a lame or aged man, or a serpent curled around the sunstone. All these symbols are found on the graven stones of the ancients, and especially on those talismans of the Gnostic epochs, which are known by the name of Abraxas. In the collection of the talismans of Paracelsus, Jupiter is represented by a priest in ecclesiastical costume, while in the tarot he appears as a grand hierophant crowned with a triple tiara, holding a threefold cross in his hands, forming the magical triangle, and representing at once the scepter and key of the three worlds. By combining all that we have said about the unity of the triad and tetrad, we shall find all that remains for us to say concerning the septenary, that grand and complete magical unity composed of 4 and 3. With reference to the plans and colors of the septenary employed in magnetic experiences, see the erudite work of M. Ragon on Les Machineries Occultes. And that is going to bring us to the end. Stick around for the wrap-up. That's going to bring us to the end of Chapter 7, the Septenary. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a somewhat difficult topic. I understand I hold some unconventional beliefs, and I have a tendency to step on toes when I relay those. It is not intentional, but it is not something I apologize for. Our day, like our base day, is formed on 8. We have 24 hours in a day. 8 of those you spend asleep. 8 of those you spend working. And 8 of those you don't spend, well, you spend according to your desire. Now, granted, in our current situation, that's commuting or doing other things besides just enjoying yourself. But the original division was sleep, work, and play, right? That is 24 divided by the Trinity into 8, right? Here, I'm going to step firmly into speculation land, right? So just so you know, this is based upon things, but not historically accurate to a 100% degree. But once upon a time, we used to count time a little bit differently. Once upon a time, the calendar was based on 360 days, not 365 and a quarter. There was a period in time that is definable where that changed. Now, that is accounted for in the Bible according to Joshua and the longest day, right? He was fighting. He needed more time to commit his genocide, so God halted the planet. That is corroborated by accounts from China at the same time being recorded completely separately, and in South America at the same time recorded completely separately. It appears through speculation that at that point in time we went from the 360-day year into the 365-day year. Timekeeping started changing right about that time. The Maya recorded it in a perfect 360-day calendar. In the Aztec, I think it was the Aztec, it might have been, anyway, they continued that, but they had problems, right? And then in India, in the Vedas, it is a 360-day year. Later on, they had to adjust that due to problems. We find the exact same thing happening between Babylon and Egypt. Once upon a time, it is entirely possible that our revolution around the sun actually took 360 days as opposed to 365. You can divide that, right? Now, if you take the current and you divide it, it doesn't work. But if you take the 360-day year and you divide that by 8, you get 45, right? So you have 8 months, 45 days per month, gives you 2 months per season, about 90 days. It works out into a perfect year. Which would cover, say, from solstice to solstice. Pretty much close to perfectly according to where we're at now. Now, today you would have to add 5 days, but it appears that once upon a time our unit of measurement was the 8. That is purely speculative, but with foundational things elsewhere. There was an event that changed that, and our understanding got thrown off. At that point in time is about when we got the 7-day week. Now, the 7-day week, in large part, comes from the Babylonian Jewish intermingling. It moved to Rome, it moved to Africa, it moved to Asia, but it originated right there in that Middle Eastern section, as far as we can tell. Part of that, I believe, was deceptive. It was for this reason. In the exact same reason that we can have a leap year and make up the quarter, we could do the same thing with those 5 days and keep it at 8. It actually works a little bit better for everybody at 8, but that's a null argument. The foundational part of 8 appears to be much larger than even I give it credit for. I am constantly finding examples of where it's actually 8, right? Most of what was discussed in here is wrong. And I don't say that lightly. I don't say it facetiously. I have affected change in my life through doing things. And the reason I have been able to do that is because I understand it. The foundational parts of it. It is 138, not 137. That is important. The number 8 is vitally important, in my estimation, for spiritual ascension. Without the understanding of the 7 internal chakras and the 1 external one, I would not have been able to do the things that I have done. It didn't work. Until I got the revelation, it wasn't working. Once I had the understanding, it does. You have the trinities, right? The as below, above, bound into the one and out into the divine. That is the foundational mechanics. 138, not 137. 7 is an important number for other reasons, but not for any of the ones that were listed here. And so, if you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, a share, a follow. Throw me a comment. If you agree or disagree with anything that I stated, put it in the box down below. And if it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. If there is another work you would like to see discussed in the way that we are doing here, drop that in the box as well. And if you really like what I'm doing over here, hit me with that super thanks. Consider joining for a membership or picking up a copy of my book. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pit Steak. Peace.